What if I told you that the reason you don't feel happy isn't because something is wrong with your life, but because you see too clearly? You've done everything society told you would bring happiness. You think deeply. You observe patterns. You question motives. Yet the more aware you become, the less joy you feel. Today, we're solving one brutal question. Why does consciousness feel like a curse? And how do powerful minds survive it without self-destruction? Awareness destroys illusions, and illusions are the fuel of happiness. Happiness does not arise from truth. It arises from selective blindness, from stories that soften reality, from beliefs that protect the mind against what it cannot emotionally digest. The human psyche was never designed to stare directly at existence without filters. It needs illusion the way the body needs sleep. Without it, the mind becomes restless, heavy, and permanently alert. Conscious people lose happiness because they lose illusion, and illusion rarely returns once exposed. The moment you begin to see patterns instead of promises, structures instead of stories, motives instead of morals, happiness starts to thin out. Life no longer feels like a narrative moving toward reward. It feels like a system operating without concern for fairness or meaning. Most people are happy because they believe effort guarantees outcomes. They believe suffering is temporary and purposeful. They believe goodness is eventually rewarded. These beliefs are not conclusions drawn from observation. They are emotional necessities. They keep the individual functional, cooperative, hopeful. Conscious awareness corrodes these beliefs quietly and permanently. Once you notice that effort often goes unnoticed, that intelligence is frequently punished, that integrity rarely wins, the internal architecture that supports happiness collapses. Not dramatically, but steadily. You stop being surprised by injustice. You stop expecting balance. And expectation is the engine of joy. Without expectation, pleasure loses its anticipation, and anticipation is what gives pleasure its intensity. Illusion also provides innocence, the ability to enjoy things without questioning their cost, origin, or emptiness. Consciousness removes innocence first. You start seeing the boredom beneath entertainment, the vanity beneath celebration, the fear beneath ambition. Things that once felt vibrant now feel mechanical, not because they changed, but because your perception did. Happiness depends on not asking certain questions. Why am I doing this? Who benefits from my belief? What happens if this never pays off? Conscious minds ask these questions instinctively. They cannot stop themselves. And every honest answer subtracts another layer of comfort. This is why conscious people are often accused of negativity. Not because they exaggerate suffering, but because they refuse to decorate it. They describe reality without emotional makeup. Society finds this threatening because shared illusions are social glue. When one person sees through them, the illusion weakens for others. Awareness is contagious, and systems built on hope do not tolerate it well. The unconscious person feels happy because they live inside narratives. The conscious person feels heavy because they live inside mechanisms. Narratives give meaning. Mechanisms give explanation. Meaning comforts. Explanation rarely does. Once you understand how things work, it becomes difficult to feel inspired by what they pretend to be. Even personal goals lose their shine. You realize how much a desire is borrowed, how ambition is shaped by comparison, how success often leads not to fulfillment, but to new anxieties dressed as progress. Conscious awareness reveals that happiness is often just dissatisfaction postponed. This does not make the conscious person superior. It makes them exposed to the raw structure of existence, where desire renews itself endlessly and satisfaction dissolves quickly. The mind realizes that happiness is not a stable state, but a brief alignment between ignorance and circumstance. And once that realization sets in, happiness becomes something you remember more than something you experience. You understand why it existed, why it worked, and why it cannot last. The tragedy is not that happiness disappears, but that you understand its mechanics too well to believe in it again. This is the price of awareness. You gain clarity, but lose comfort. You gain understanding, but lose illusion. An illusion was never trivial. It was a psychological shelter that made life feel lighter than it actually is. When that shelter collapses, you stand directly under reality, unprotected, alert, unable to pretend that what you see is anything other than what it is. Conscious minds feel pain more deeply than pleasure. Pain is not merely a sensation for the conscious mind. It is an event that expands in time, depth, and meaning. Where an unconscious person experiences pain as a moment, the conscious person experiences it as a process. It does not arrive alone and leave quietly. It brings memory, interpretation, and prediction with it, multiplying its weight far beyond the original cause. Pleasure is simple because it requires very little awareness. It asks only that the moment be enjoyed. Pain, on the other hand, invites analysis. Why did this happen? What does it reveal about me? What does it say about the world? Consciousness turns suffering into information, and information is heavy to carry. The conscious mind cannot stop itself from tracing pain backward and forward. A single insult becomes a reflection on social hierarchy. A single loss becomes evidence of life's instability. A single failure becomes a question about worth, effort, and fate. Pain does not remain isolated. It connects itself to patterns, and patterns give pain permanence. Pleasure fades quickly because it offers nothing to investigate. Once experienced, it leaves no unanswered questions. There is nothing to dissect, nothing to solve. Conscious minds crave depth, and pleasure is shallow by nature. It passes without leaving intellectual residue, while pain lingers because it demands understanding. This imbalance creates an emotional asymmetry. Pain feels heavier, longer, and more real than pleasure. Not because life contains more suffering than joy, but because suffering engages the full capacity of awareness. Pleasure touches the surface of the mind. Pain reaches the core. Conscious people often notice that happy moments feel fragile, almost suspicious. Even while experiencing pleasure, part of the mind remains elate, observing its temporary nature. There is an awareness that the moment will end, that it cannot be held, that it will soon become memory. This awareness dilutes joy at the moment it arises. Unconscious people surrender fully to pleasure. Conscious people never fully surrender to anything. There is always a layer of observation, a quiet witness watching the experience unfold. That witness protects against illusion, but it also prevents immersion. Pleasure requires abandonment. Consciousness resists abandonment. Pain, however, does not require surrender. It invades, and once inside, consciousness amplifies it. The mind replays it, reframes it, reinterprets it. Each replay deepens the emotional imprint. Pain becomes narrative. Narrative becomes identity. Identity becomes burden. This is why conscious people often feel emotionally exhausted without obvious cause. They are not carrying more events. They are carrying more meaning. Every interaction is processed, contextualized, weighed. Every disappointment is connected to a larger understanding of how life operates. The emotional load accumulates quietly. There is also the problem of anticipation. Conscious minds do not wait for pain to arrive. They foresee it. They understand probabilities, patterns, human behavior. This foresight creates preemptive suffering. You do not only suffer what happens, you suffer what is likely to happen. The future becomes emotionally active before it exists. Pleasure cannot compete with this. You cannot anticipate joy with the same certainty. Happiness is fragile and conditional. Pain feels inevitable. The conscious mind prepares for loss, betrayal, decay. This preparation feels like realism, but it carries a psychological cost. Over time, this creates a temperament that appears calm on the surface and heavy underneath. Conscious people are often composed because they have already processed worst-case scenarios internally. They are not surprised easily, but this composure is built on accumulated pain, not resilience. The world often mistakes this depth for pessimism. In reality, it is heightened sensitivity combined with intellectual honesty. Conscious minds do not feel less. They feel more, and they understand what they feel. This understanding does not soften pain. It sharpens it, gives it structure, makes it difficult to ignore. Pleasure remains fleeting because it offers no insight. Pain remains dominant because it teaches. And the conscious mind, whether it wants to or not, is always learning from what hurts more than from what feels good. Society rewards unconscious optimism, not clear perception. Society is not designed to elevate those who see clearly. It is designed to preserve momentum. Every system depends on participation, compliance, and belief. Optimism is not encouraged because it is accurate, but because it is useful. It keeps people moving forward without questioning where they are going or who benefits from their movement. Unconscious optimism functions as social lubricant. It smooths over contradictions, excuses injustice, and reframes failure as personal fault rather than structural design. Those who possess it are easier to integrate, easier to motivate, easier to manage. They accept slogans where explanations would be uncomfortable. They repeat narratives where silence will be dangerous. Clear perception disrupts this flow. The conscious individual notices inconsistencies between what is promised and what is delivered. They recognize that effort does not guarantee outcome, that morality does not ensure protection, that intelligence often complicates survival instead of improving it. These observations are not welcome because they slow systems down. When someone points out that a ladder is missing rungs, the solution is rarely to fix the ladder. More often, the observer is told to climb with more enthusiasm. This is how society handles awareness. It reframes perception as attitude and treats understanding as a personal flaw. Conscious people are frequently labeled difficult, negative, or cynical. These labels are not descriptions of their worldview but tools of social correction. They signal that the individual is deviating from the emotional tone required for group harmony. Positivity is a performance expectation, not an emotional state. Belonging often requires agreement with illusions. To fit in, one must affirm hope, celebrate progress, and speak as though the future is reliably better than the present. Clear perception hesitates here. It sees cycles instead of progress, repetition instead of evolution, power shifting hands while structures remain intact. This hesitation creates social distance. Conversations feel shallow. Celebrations feel forced. Shared excitement feels theatrical. The conscious individual becomes an outsider not because they reject people, but because they cannot fully participate in collective self-deception. Society rewards those who validate its myths. The individual who works tirelessly without questioning the distribution of reward is praised. The one who remains hopeful despite repeated evidence is admired. Optimism becomes a moral virtue, detached from reality and immune to contradiction. Clear perception, by contrast, offers no immediate utility. It does not energize crowds or sell futures. It introduces doubt, and doubt is dangerous to systems that rely on belief. As a result, conscious people are often sidelined, not through punishment, but through neglect. Their insights are ignored until crisis arrives. Only when systems fail do people briefly turn to those who warned them. Even then, the acknowledgement is temporary. Once stability returns, optimism is restored, and awareness is pushed back into the margins. This creates a strange psychological position. The conscious individual sees what others do not, yet is discouraged from speaking. Silence becomes a survival strategy. Expression becomes selective. Over time, this restraint creates internal pressure, a sense of carrying unshared knowledge. Social success often goes to those who simplify reality, not those who expose it. Complexity does not inspire trust. Confidence does. And confidence is easier to perform when one believes the story being told. Conscious people hesitate because they see too many variables to speak with certainty. The irony is that society depends on clear perception for long-term survival, but resists it in the short term. Awareness threatens comfort. Comfort maintains order. Order is valued more than truth. As a result, conscious individuals learn that understanding costs social approval. They are faced with a choice between belonging and honesty. Many choose silence. Some choose isolation. Few choose performance. The happiness gap deepens here. It is easy to feel happy when one's perception is rewarded, mirrored, and reinforced. Conscious people experience the opposite. Their understanding creates friction. Their honesty creates distance. Their clarity removes them from the emotional rhythm of the group. They are not unhappy because society is cruel, but because it is structured to favor those who feel good over those who see well. Power comes from enduring truth, not escaping it. Power is often mistaken for dominance, confidence, or emotional brightness. In reality, power begins where comfort ends. It emerges in the mind that no longer needs illusions to function. Conscious people do not gain power by becoming happier. They gain it by becoming stable in the presence of truth. Escaping reality requires energy. Maintaining illusion requires constant emotional maintenance. The unconscious mind must repeatedly reassure itself that things will work out, that meaning is guaranteed, that suffering is justified. This effort is invisible, but exhausting. When illusion collapses, it feels like loss. In fact, it is a release. The conscious individual stops negotiating with reality. They no longer ask life to be fair, meaningful, or kind. They accept what is without emotional bargaining. This acceptance is not resignation. It is strategic clarity. When expectations die, perception sharpens. Truth is heavy, but it is consistent. Illusion is light, but unstable. Power grows from consistency. A mind that knows what to expect is harder to manipulate. Hope makes people obedient. Fear makes them reactive. Clarity makes them autonomous. Enduring truth requires emotional discipline. It means allowing discomfort without rushing to soothe it. It means witnessing injustice without needing immediate psychological relief. It means holding awareness steady when the mind demands escape. This endurance builds internal authority. Most people collapse under prolonged awareness. They seek distraction, stimulation, or belief systems that promise relief. Conscious individuals who endure instead of escaping develop a rare psychological posture. They become internally governed rather than emotionally driven. This internal governance is a foundation of power. It allows a person to act without needing validation, to move without needing approval, to remain calm without reassurance. Their stability does not depend on circumstances aligning with desire. Power is the ability to remain functional when others need comfort. It is a capacity to make decisions without emotional fog. It is a refusal to outsource meaning to external systems. Enduring truth also changes one's relationship with suffering. Pain is no longer interpreted as failure or punishment. It becomes information. Information strengthens orientation. Orientation reduces fear. Fearlessness is not the absence of fear, but the inability of fear to override clarity. The conscious individual learns that despair is not dangerous. Confusion is. Emotional numbness is not collapse. Self-deception is. Once this hierarchy is understood, the mind reorganizes itself around endurance rather than escape. This reorganization removes the urgency to feel happy. Happiness becomes irrelevant to function. Stability replaces pleasure as a primary goal. Stability allows patience. Patience allows timing. Timing allows influence. People who require happiness are easy to control. People who require truth are difficult to sway. They cannot be bribed with promises or threatened with loss of illusion. They have already faced the worst internally. This does not make life lighter. It makes it quieter. Emotional noise fades. Reaction slows. Observation deepens. The mind becomes less expressive and more precise. Power does not announce itself. It is felt as gravity. Others sense it as calm authority, emotional distance, or unsettling composure. This is not charisma. It is the absence of inner conflict. The conscious person who endures truth does not seek to dominate others. They dominate themselves. Their impulses, fears, hopes, and cravings no longer dictate their behavior. Control shifts inward. This inward control is the highest form of power available to the human mind. It cannot be taken, threatened, or granted. It emerges naturally when illusion is no longer needed and truth is no longer resisted. The world rewards happiness publicly, but it respects endurance privately. Those who can remain steady without emotional reward operate on a level beneath social gains. They are not visible leaders. They are silent constants. Once you stop running from truth, you stop running altogether. Movement becomes intentional. Stillness becomes possible. And in that stillness, power consolidates itself into something unshakable.